I think I was rather fortunate in I had wonderful school teachers in the first and second grade. And they taught me almost all I knew in school. And from the third grade on, I'm sorry to say they were nice people, but they were dopes.
And when they got to fifth grade, oh my.
Oh yeah, and that was Miss Corcoran.
Hi, I'm Reg Hart. In 1968, I was stumbling home drunk. I was 22. And I sat down to get my bearings, and a fellow a little bit younger than me at the time asked if it was okay to sleep in the park. And I said, well, you could be arrested for being a vagrant, and it's supposed to rain. What's your problem? He said, my dad said, my way or the highway. I said, well, you made the right choice. Come with me. And he stayed with me for a while, and he took me to a party. There was a fellow sitting on the floor with a book in his lap. I said, what's that? He said, it's called the I Ching, or the Yi King is another pronunciation. It's I-C-H-I-N-G, I Ching, Yi King. And it's an ancient Chinese oracle, and it was old when Confucius was young. And a lot of Chinese wise men sat together and they contemplated how things work, and they figured out a system that you can access. This is the Wilhelm Baines edition I'm talking about, with introduction by Carl Jung. And I bought my first copy of it, and I read it as a book. And it teaches that the superior man learns to live with little in times of plenty, and thus prepares himself for times of want. Now, I grew up dirt poor, working class, so I was familiar with learning how to live with little. My mom had 8 of us to take care of at one point. I'm the first. And I read this book and I liked its ideas, so I decided to start living it. The I Ching teaches that the inferior man tries to create order out of chaos, and the superior person recognizes the order inherent in what the world sees as chaos. Now, when I was a little bit younger, when I was around 18 or 19, my high school principal said to me one day, you've got the wrong attitude. If you leave this school today, you'll starve in 2 weeks. And that morning I was in Sault Ste. Marie, and that night I arrived in Toronto with just enough money to buy a beer, and drinking age was 21 and I wasn't. I didn't let that stop me. And my life began. And one day I started showing films, silent films, because I had a small library of silent films on 8mm, and people asked me if I'd show them to them, so I did. And one night I was showing Lon Chaney in the original 1923 version of The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and it had rained all day. I couldn't see people coming out. But I thought, you better go, just in case. So I went, just in case, and there were 3 people there. A woman, her husband, their 2 sons, and their daughter. And that was the family of Robert and Jane Jacobs. And that's how I met Jane Jacobs. And I knew her for 2 years before I saw a newspaper article that said she'd written a book called The Death and Life of Great American Cities. So naturally I bought it, and I read it, and I read it again, and I read it again, and again, and again. And Mrs. Jacobs teaches that there's a real order in cities which the people in charge are constantly destroying. That is the same thing that the I Ching teaches. It amazes me when people read Mrs. Jacobs' book, The Death and Life of Great American Cities, and then say that reading her book inspired them to become urban planners. To me, that's a bit like reading The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich and deciding to be a Nazi. I mean, the urban planners are the ones who are screwing things up. But something happens when people read books. Most of them don't think about what they read, don't take it to heart and think it through, and that's a big problem we've got, but that's how life is. Mrs. Jacobs passed away a few years ago, around 2006, and her kids, when I see them, tell me, "Our mother loved you." Now, if I'd stayed in the principal's office and been a good boy, done what he told me to do, I would never have met one of the greatest thinkers of the 20th century. And I wouldn't have met quite a few more people, too. So I'm not a proponent of our educational system. In an interview, Mrs. Jacobs said, "I had great teachers in the first and second grades who taught me everything I know. After that, the teachers were nice, but they were dopes." Well, although most of my teachers were dopes, not all of them were. But by God, most of them. And it's probably the same with you. Mrs. Jacobs, "I had great teachers in the first and second grades who taught me everything I know. After that, the teachers were nice, but they were dopes." Now, if you're a young man or a woman and you're 7 or 8 years old and you think, "I think these people are dopes." Or maybe you're 12 or 13 and you're thinking about your teachers, "I think these people are dopes." Maybe you're 16, 15, 14, and you think, "I think these teachers are dopes." I got news for you. You're in damn good company. So, they are. This is Reg Hart in Toronto. God bless.
I think I was rather fortunate in I had wonderful school teachers in the first and second grade. And they taught me almost all I knew in school. And from the third grade on, I'm sorry to say they were nice people, but they were dopes.
And when they got to fifth grade, oh my.
Oh, yeah. And that was Miss Corcoran.
In this edition of The Way It Is, the fourth of our special reports on how we love the land, the new, wasteful, often destructive, but nevertheless exciting shape of the cities. Our reporter, Ken LaFoley. Let's go.
That's one way to build cities, and most of tonight's report deals with what we do to the land and ourselves when we build cities that way. But there's another way. Back downtown in the old urban centers, we're building the cities of Canada for the second time. First, we knocked down the original cities, square blocks and sometimes square miles at a time. Then we build them up again, nearly always out of vastly larger building blocks than anything we used the first time around. Do we do all this well, or do we do it badly? That's the starting point for this inquiry. And for the answer, we went to the lady over there, the one who's trying to edge her way into the traffic on Toronto's University Avenue. She's an American who moved to Canada last summer, Jane Jacobs, author of the definitive book called The Death and Life of Great American Cities, and quite possibly the best qualified critic in the world to do for you what she does now, review the kind of job we're doing as we build Toronto and Montreal for the second time.
I hate University Avenue. Toronto's a very refreshing city to come to from the States. It's all full of romanticism and quirks and surprises and ingenuity, particularly in the way outdoor space is used. In Markham Street Village, the way those front yards of former residences, which are now shops, have been made into really wide sidewalks. Marvelous for window shopping, for sitting around in. This is another aspect of this Toronto genius for using bits of outdoors. This is not usual in most cities today. This isn't a dead city. There doesn't seem to be much creativity at the top. It seems to me that Toronto has kind of a split personality, a civic schizophrenia. On the one level, there's the spirit of, individuals and small groups who do things, what you might call the vernacular spirit. This is all very informal, ingenious, quite romantic, and full of fun, a great deal of fun. It seems to me that the official spirit of Toronto is stamp out fun, pompous, impressed with mediocrity if it's very, very big and expensive.
Avengers. Laura Lind in I Weekly said Reg Hart's uniform is everything that Jane Jacobs wrote about. And it is. She arrived in Toronto in 1968. She saw a street flyer for a showing of Lon Chaney's Hunchback of Notre Dame, 1923. And it was a rainy Saturday night, September 1968. Rained all day. I couldn't see anybody coming out. I didn't want to go, but I went. Finally, and outside waiting in the rain was a mother, a father, their two sons, and their daughter, the only people who showed up. And I brought them in, and the first thing Mrs. Jacobs said was, "This is just like Cinema 16 in New York." And then they came every week after that.
Let's see if we can get hit by the car. Hi, I'm Jim Jacobs. I've lived in Toronto for many years. I moved here with my parents, Bob and Jane Jacobs. The Public Enemy Theater was on Yonge Street here, a building where this new building is now. My mother was particularly interested in this new venture in this old, beaten up old building with low rent. It's just the kind of thing that she wrote about should be happening, and the value of these old buildings for new ventures.
But what especially makes this place everything she wrote about is the constant efforts of the city to destroy it.
Toronto's a very refreshing city to come to from the States. It's all full of romanticism and quirks and surprises and ingenuity, particularly in the way outdoor space is used. In Markham Street Village, the way those front yards of former residences, which are now shops, have been made into really wide sidewalks. Marvelous for window shopping, for sitting around in. This is another aspect of this Toronto genius for using bits of outdoors. This is not usual in most cities today. This isn't a dead city. There doesn't seem to be much creativity at the top.
Reg is a very sensitive guy. He comes across as tough and brave, but he's so thoughtful, so sensitive, and really can be amazingly supportive and wonderful in ways that you just might not expect. Reg is, above all, unpredictable. And when Jane died, Reg was devastated, as were we all. And he left a card. You know, we got many of these condolence cards with the usual trite messages of, you know, your loss, this, that, and the other. It's the usual sort of thing. And here was a card from Reg, that beautiful picture, and the message inside was just blank. Reg Hart. There's a great big blank hole left. when anyone dies. And I never saw it expressed so clearly as a condolence card without any writing. And it meant a lot to us.
This isn't a dead city. There doesn't seem to be much creativity at the top. It seems to me that Toronto has kind of a split personality, a civic schizophrenia. On the one level, there's the spirit of, individuals and small groups who do things, what you might call the vernacular spirit. This is all very informal, ingenious, quite romantic, and full of fun, a great deal of fun. It seems to me that the official spirit of Toronto is stamp out fun, pompous, impressed with mediocrity if it's very, very big and expensive.
I think I was rather fortunate in I had wonderful school teachers in the first and second grade. And they taught me almost all I knew in school. And from the third grade on, I'm sorry to say they were nice people, but they were dopes.
And when they got to fifth grade, oh my.
Oh, yeah. And that was Miss Corcoran. I think we are misled by universities and other formal intellectual places into thinking that there actually are separate fields of knowledge. And most people know that there aren't. But they're always getting victimized somehow by the idea that there are. And they're delighted when, in some respectable way, like from this stage, it becomes clear that there are not separate fields of knowledge, that they link up, that life and the earth and everything in it really is a seamless web, and that's not merely a poetic expression, that it's a very functional thing, that it's a seamless web, and it is possible to understand something about these webs. We think about nearly all our education, it's always it's not the thing itself, it's preparation for something, which is preparation for something. We're incompetent by the time we're prepared.